and I wish I had written many books, but I've only written one book, and several articles with one book, but thank you for magnifying my accomplishments. I'm honored to be here once again to speak before your organization. I spoke last year, and I spoke at another session in the spring, and I enjoy coming to speak to people who really enjoy and love history. And I, as a teacher of history, speaking to other teachers of history, or those who love history, I'm always glad to be amongst fellow believers and fellow worshipers at the altar of knowledge. So I thank you for coming and being here with me on a pretty clear and cool Saturday morning. And I'm sure you have other things you'd like to, well, I'm sure you have other places you want to be or other things you'd like to do today, but I thank you for coming. As Mr. Vasquez says, I've been at USD for a number of years. I'm a native of Los Angeles, and as a consequence, all my research is focusing on the LA area, in particular, in Southern California in general. My next step is an emphasis here is the word try. What I'm trying to do now in my next research project is to explore the Islamic influence on Spain and how Islam influenced Spain, and by association how Islam influenced Mexico, then California. And I just recently returned from a trip to Spain this past summer, exploring this particular topic. So give me several years and let's see what I find and what results I can come up with. But in the meantime, I still remain focused on Mexican California and U.S. history, and this intersection between how Americans and Mexicans met in Southern California and what happened during this encounter. So I'm expanding upon the topic that Mr. Vasquez had mentioned about California being a place, Mexican California being a place that rewards the man that works hard. And I realized from speaking to Angela that one of the themes of this conference this year is frontiers. So today my topic will basically be how frontiers in history intersect and how this intersection can shed more light on the Mexican and Anglo-American interaction in Southern California. And to go about my project, I have all sorts of images here I'd like to share with you. But before we get to the images, we have to, like any scholar, or like any teacher, we should define terms. The first term we have to define, of course, what we mean by frontera, which of course is very much related to the English word frontier. And there are at least two definitions, as we all know, to the word frontier. First and foremost, a frontier could basically suggest or mark or describe a boundary, something that's hard and fast, something that's permanent. If we think about the Mexican-U.S. frontier, we might even imagine barriers. We can imagine walls. And these barriers and walls basically serve to define and separate one nation from another. So there's a sense of permanence, a sense of certitude, and a sense of separation. One meaning of frontier, a hard and fast boundary. The second meaning, of course, is more expansive. Frontier, as many of us know, can also mean a wild and unexplored place. Something that's unknown. Something that's beyond understanding or perhaps beyond knowledge. Something that needs to be examined, and a place that certainly is beyond human habitation. So many of us are familiar with this term of frontier, a wild expanse. So let's relate this now to history. How frontier in history can, in some respects, and the meanings of frontier can coincide with certain expressions and definitions of history. Many of us being teachers know that that history could certainly mean a search for the truth, an embrace of the truth. And you, many of you being teachers and having worked with young people like I do, are very familiar with the way our students look at history and what our students look for when they examine history. And one anecdote I can give you, several years ago at USD, I teach a research seminar, and I asked my students one afternoon, why do we study history? What is history for? And one student raised his hand and he said, without a doubt, without any sense of hesitation, history is the search for truth. There is nothing more to the meaning of history, and there's nothing less to the meaning of history. It's the search for truth. And history is nothing more than a presentation, an analysis of the truth. So in this sense, history and one meaning of frontier certainly coincide. As frontier in terms of a boundary, being a hard and fast place, an easily recognizable landmark separating one nation from another, we might see that in one respect, history can coincide with this meaning of frontier. If history means the truth, something that's verifiable, something that's certain, this could basically be a way of also overlapping with one sense of frontier. But let's go a little deeper here. I mentioned here the great French philosopher Voltaire. In the 18th century, someone asked Voltaire, what is history? And those of us who are familiar with Voltaire's work know he's very little sarcastic, very sardonic, sort of this dark biting wit. And Voltaire said, apparently he laughed, and he said, history is a trick the living play on the dead. Or we can go one step further and think about something more contemporary, Henry Ford. Some of you are very familiar with Henry Ford, the founder of the Ford Motor Company. And Henry Ford had a great disrespect and not a very high regard for teachers, well, maybe you phrase that, for academics, for professors. And he basically said that history is bunk. Okay? History is bunk. So this sense of history being imprecise, uncertain, unknown, perhaps deceitful and devious, could perhaps coincide with the second definition of frontier. A frontier can mean a wild, expansive place with few landmarks by which to judge where we are, few landmarks to know which way we should go. Then Voltaire's definition and Henry Ford's definition of history might apply. History, like a frontier, is a very uncertain place. So uncertain, so unpredictable, we don't know which way to go. Much less do we know how do we arrive at the truth. How can we prove what is true and what is wrong? So we're sort of at loggerheads here. Which way do we go? Is history the search for truth, or is history basically a very imprecise, unpredictable enterprise? So this means we have to go a bit further and see how, at least in U.S. and Mexican history, how history and, to a certain degree, frontier intersect, how one intertwines with the other. And to complicate, and I'm not here to simplify things, but let me make things even more complicated. To really understand and appreciate how history and frontier can intersect in both U.S. and Mexican history, we have to really come to grasp with how scholars have tried to grapple with this question. What exactly is history, and what should history do? And this brings to mind a great debate that was held in the middle part of the 20th century, chiefly in France, but a debate that has reverberated here to the present, and even had an impact on the way American scholars look at history. It concerns a